Hello folks, today we have an interesting little project for you because we were sent this Dominator Platinum RGB kit a while ago, and obviously there must be some mistake at the factory because whilst it does say Dominator Platinum, it appears to be completely black. Now the black does look rather nice, but I kind of want platinum. So this being a modding and DIY sort of channel, it just makes sense to do it ourselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the heat spreaders off these sticks and then we're going to plate them in actual platinum. Makes more sense, doesn't it? The tricky thing with these heat spreaders is that they're made from anodized aluminium, so that's how they've achieved this lovely matte black finish. Now that works really well for the consumer product, but if you want to try and mod it and plate it yourself, that's quite difficult because the aluminium is going to be very resistant to any sort of changes. And in fact, to plate it, you need to go through a whole process of not only removing the anodizing layer, but you then need to dope it with various ions, plate it with sacrificial metals, you've got to plate it with copper and nickel, maybe chrome if you want some shiny finish before doing all of your precious metals. So I'm not really kitted out for doing that part here in the workshop. I could give it a go maybe, but honestly, I think it's a better idea if I just send it off to some people who actually know what they're doing. So we're going to be sending off the top bars to be platinum plated professionally. But before we do that, we need to prep them. And actually this is the part that you can do at home for lots of different products because it's actually quite a simple process. Now, you may remember we removed the anodizing layer on a water-cooled TR4 block for our 1000D mod a while back. And that mod, I decided not to use a chemical solution because I didn't want to mess up the threads. Now that's actually not going to be a problem for these because the threads inside here are all handled by little tiny little screws with internal threads on that, which I'm not going to be sending to be plated. Those instead I'm just going to strip here and maybe paint or just leave as a nice sort of polished state because I can do that quite easily. So for that reason, this is a perfect case for stripping it using sodium hydroxide. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, sodium hydroxide is quite dangerous stuff. You can just use oven cleaner, which will contain sodium hydroxide quite often. Now you're just going to want to make sure that you don't use an incredibly concentrated solution because actually the sodium hydroxide will not only eat through the anodizing layer, but will also eat into the aluminium layer underneath as well. You do have to keep an eye on it and you don't want to spend too much time. I've certainly heard some horror stories where people have used some really strong stuff and they've put big aluminium objects and then they've just come back and it's largely gone. So we're going to be nice and quick and careful and keep an eye on these parts when we're doing it because they are quite small and thin, so they've got quite a serious surface area to them. But we're going to be going through the process, and then after we've stripped the anodizing, we're then going to be buffing them up, polishing it, and making them look all nice and fancy. So we've taken the heat spreaders apart and then given them a good wash over with some acetone to remove all the sticky residues that are left over from the adhesives that hold them onto the ICs and the various other parts of the actual DIMMs themselves. But now we need to assemble the solution. So what we're going to be doing is taking this sodium hydroxide and then we're going to be adding 50 grams of this to some cold water. Now obviously safety is going to be quite an important thing for this one, so we're going to be using some nitrile gloves and some safety specs. You don't want to do this in a place which doesn't have good ventilation because this stuff really is very dangerous and it can create a lot of fumes. So just be careful, make sure you adhere to all the instructions that are on the back of any packet that you use, and definitely make sure to remember to add your sodium hydroxide to water and not the other way around. Because if you add the water to the powder, then it's going to make a really concentrated solution and then do all nasty things before you can add the rest. It'll heat up, it might explode and splutter, send fumes everywhere, eat through your materials, what have you. You don't want to do that. Add it the other way around so it's nice and dilute at all times, and then bring it up to the correct concentration. That's what we're going to do right now. Now, the important thing here is always to use roasted pistachio butter. Don't use fresh pistachio butter, it will mess everything up. Well, this has been a bit of an adventure because I got it completely wrong. In fact, these parts, as you can see, stripped perfectly, which means these are anodized aluminium. But the tops are exactly how they were to begin with, which means they are not aluminium. Now, it didn't actually feel like they were aluminium, really, I guess. They're a little bit maybe too strong, and they do feel a bit hefty, but I wasn't quite sure if that's just me maybe being a bit paranoid about it. But they are most definitely steel, because when they put them into the NaOH solution, nothing happened at all, not a single thing. So then we took them out, had a little play around with my Fordham, trying to see what would happen if we just removed the coating. Is it something like the coating was extra thick? Nope, no reaction at all. And of course, now we've stripped some of it off on this one over here, you can see the color of the metal is completely different. It's definitely not aluminium. In fact, it's definitely steel by the look of things. It's definitely steel by the look of things. It's definitely steel by the look of things. So it's now the next day. The weather's exactly the same, pretty boring, but we have got some more information. My friend at Corsair said that there's a good chance they're probably made from zinc. And actually that's quite sensible, much more sensible than the steel suggestion, because obviously zinc is a very good material for casting. And these are clearly die cast, and it would just make perfect sense actually for them to be made out of zinc. So just to test this theory, see how it went, I thought I'd try reacting a little bit with some sulfuric acid. Now I don't really have a lot of sulfuric acid, it's actually quite difficult to buy in the UK now, so I only had a tiny little bit that I could try on the corner, but it did take the coating off instantly. And I mean, it really just straight off, just in the same way that the sodium hydroxide reacted with the aluminium. So I think that's probably a good chance that this is indeed zinc. And now that I know how to work with it, I should be able to strip all the coating off really evenly. Now, as I mentioned, I don't really have much sulfuric acid, and I'd rather not try and get more of it. So what I'm going to try doing is using distilled vinegar. Now that's fairly strong acetic acid. It should work, but it might take ages. So what we're going to do is we're going to experiment. I've got a tray of acetic acid here. Well, distilled vinegar used for pickling, but it's pretty strong, I can smell it. And we're going to just put the sticks in there and see how it works. If it takes absolutely ages and doesn't really get anywhere, then I'll have to go find some drain unblocker that's acid based or something like that. But if it of course works with this, then that's nice and easy. So let's plop it in and see what happens. Well, we can add that one to the list of failed experiments. It did absolutely nothing. I'm sure that if I left it in there for a lot longer, you might get some results. But honestly, with the concentration of the acid in that vinegar mix, it's just rubbish. So I went out and bought some other things. Now the thing is, when I was testing the coatings, I used this ridiculously strong stuff, which is proper sulfuric acid drain unblocker, and is now thoroughly illegal to purchase in the UK, and I've run out, so that's no good. So adding to the BitTech laboratory, it seems, we have this HG cleaner, and we've also got this lovely Kill Rock stuff. Now that's formic acid apparently, and that's phosphoric acid. So I think probably the best bet is going to be phosphoric acid. We'll give that a go. Failing that, we can try the formic acid. It's probably going to be more about concentration rather than the power of the acid itself. But we're going to see how this one fares, and if it works, since I've got my gloves and goggles on, we should get some pretty good results. So let's take a look and see how that works now. I'll tell you what, that was quite a journey getting those tops to the point where we can actually do something with them for the plating. Getting rid of all of that coating was really difficult with the acids because they just took ages. I ended up ordering some higher strength hydrochloric to do the job, and that helped, but it was mostly done by the drain cleaner, just leaving it in for a long time and giving it a good scrub. Either way, it wasn't a particularly fast process, and the issue is, of course, now we've got this horrible chemical etch all over the surface. So before we can send it off to be plated, we're going to need to buff the hell out of those things. We're going to take them and then we're going to sand them down to, say, like a 1200 grit finish using the surface plate over here, much like I did when I made the accent piece for the EK Velocity block, because the surface plate will keep things nice and flat, and that will give a really even, crisp edge to all the sides. The issue is there's also little recesses, and I want the plating to be quite good across those little parts on the front. So there's little dips and things where the screws are meant to go. Now to get into that, what we're going to do is use the Fordham over here with one of these, which is a little brass bristle brush. Now this will get into those corners and sort of buff them up quite nicely, because the etched surface isn't very thick and it's quite soft. So this will do quite a good job of that without marring the surface for the rest of it. And then after that, we're going to give it a good go on the buffing wheel, and that should get it to exactly the finish that we want. I'll skip forward a few days and we have this, which is a rather nondescript little package that came in the mail today. So why don't we have a look and see how they came out? I'm really quite excited about this. Oof. Now that is shiny. I'll tell you what, that is really cool. It's got a completely different color to the zinc. Sort of like a, I guess, it's more like silver or sort of rhodium. Obviously it's platinum, but wow, that's very cool. I think it's about time we put these things together and see how they actually look as a whole. Well, I think it's fair to say that I am absolutely stoked with how these came out, because it has been such a journey getting them to this point. I thought this was going to be quite a quick mod, but it turns out that actually there were difficulties at every single turn. The easiest bit was removing the anodizing. That was just using NaOH, but then trying to strip the zinc and then get the finish on that to be just right, and then even things like sending them out to be plated turned out to be quite difficult as well. But we've got them all back, and I think they look absolutely fantastic. I'm a big fan of how the metal kind of catches the light, and I think it has more personality than the matte black that the original sticks used to have. So it's a bit of a shame that they don't have anything quite like this in the actual lineup, but who knows, maybe in the future. Of course, if you did like this mod, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we've got some fantastic modding content just around the corner, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Of course, you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, builds.gg, Discord, and Twitter. I'll catch you next time, folks.